We are following major economic news. New numbers suggesting the U.S. labor market is not as strong as it has appeared to be. According to a preliminary report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. added nearly 1 million fewer jobs than originally reported for the year.
What? No way, dude. Nah, everyone's saying it's great. Trump keeps telling me he's great, and he would never lie to me. When Biden was in office, liberals would be like, nah. I mean, to be fair, we're going to find out how bad it can actually be now that it's Trump in charge. But, you know, it's just, I thought it was hot. I thought America was the hottest from the standpoint of heat.
Through March. This is a gigantic adjustment that we're talking about here. And if it holds through February, when the final tally is reported, this would mark the largest annual revision ever. CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich is here.
Look at those two numbers side by side to understand that perhaps the stock market is not the greatest indication or the greatest way to appraise the health of the economy.
Here to break down the numbers for us. Vanessa, what does this tell us about the state of the economy?
Well, it certainly shows that in the months of April 2024 through March of 2025, the U.S. economy, in terms of the jobs market, was a lot weaker than we had originally expected and which we originally seen as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But today's report is an annual report. It comes out every single year, and there's been some sort of revisions that the BLS has done for the better part of 90 years now. What is a little atypical about this report is that the revision is so large. It is the largest on record, 911,000 jobs. To the downside, fewer jobs added over the course of that 12-month period. If you average that out, that's about 76,000 fewer jobs added each month. And that time period that we're talking about, that is mostly under the Biden administration, just a couple months, 3 months under the Trump administration. Now, sectors that really saw the steepest number of jobs lost in terms of what we thought was going to be there, but actually didn't end up being there, was trade, transportation, and utilities. 226,000 fewer jobs there. Leisure and hospitality, 176,000 fewer jobs than initially reported. And for professional and business services, 158,000 fewer jobs than initially reported. But as I said, this is typical. These revisions certainly do happen. But to the downside, one of the reasons, or a couple reasons rather, that this does happen is because the Bureau of Labor Statistics is really trying to work with survey data that they get from businesses. So some newer companies may have suggested that they were hiring more people than they actually did. And that
No. What? No. What? You mean to tell me to keep lying about how many job openings actually exist to make it seem as though these businesses are growing, but it's all a lie? What is going on? That would never happen. I'm so shocked. This is shocking, I tell you. This is my fault. I'm a small business and I pledged to hire 11,000 workers. Listen, we got a little ambitious, okay? Here at Hasan Enterprise, we got a little ahead of ourselves. Genuine question, didn't this happen under Biden? Yes, it happened under Biden as well. The problem is the trend lines are really bad. Like the direction that we're heading in, it's not just immediate action reaction. It's not just about like, oh, the jobs reports look terrible. There's a couple different issues here. Number one, we constantly look at two metrics to understand the health of the economy overall. And these two metrics actually don't present a clear picture. I would say three metrics. Number one, stock performance, the stock market performance overall. This is an incredibly stupid, incredibly narrow focus on trying to make an assessment on the health of the economy overall. It's incredibly stupid because the stock market is a unique system of exacerbated wealth disparity where the top 10% of wealth in this country own 90% of the stocks. And as is the case with wealth consolidation, everywhere else, and including in the stock market as well, that the gains are privatized, but the losses are socialized. So when it's doing well, you don't necessarily see the benefits. You feel like you're seeing the benefits, you know, your 401k looks good, whatever. But when it's doing poorly, you definitely feel the impact. So So that's number one. Number two is the GDP. Okay. GDP is not a good metric of the health of the economy either. Look no further than the GDP of a European country, a European capital, as opposed to like, I don't know, Alabama as a state. Alabama as a state will have a higher GDP than a European capital. Would you say that the people living in that European capital are living worse lives overall than like the average poor person in a place like Alabama? No, of course not. You know, look at the UK versus Alabama. So it's once again not a real metric for the success or the health of the economy. It's not a very good representation of the health of the economy at all. One of the reasons why we have this massive GDP, massive explosive GDP is because of, for example, private healthcare. Private healthcare should not exist. It shouldn't exist at all. And yet it is expensive. It has it brings a tremendous amount of revenue. A lot of money is exchanging hands, even though it is a middleman that is unethical in its existence and is totally there just to generate profit, generate revenue, create revenue. It's a massive industry. All right. That is among many other reasons why American GDP is so large. So last but not least, okay, last but not least, the last metric for a healthy economy that is also, once again, patently incorrect is unemployment. Okay. We look at the rate of unemployment in this country, and it's at 4.3%. What are you talking about? That's actually somewhat healthy. You don't want full employment because then, then you have labor has too much power, right? That's like a thing that people bring up. And you don't want like unemployment over a certain percentage because that means like the economy, there's too many people that are not working. But unemployment in and of itself is actually not a good metric for the health of the economy either, because it actually does not show the much larger number of underemployed people. Okay. When you look at underemployment, people working part-time gigs, for example, or people working way below the wages that they normally should be getting, you realize that the underemployment rate is so much higher. It's around a quarter of the economy, the job market. And that is massively consequential. Okay. So there are a lot of these issues and none of them get addressed. So when these guys are actually talking about the health of the economy, but they fail to consider what the actual problems are, you basically arrive at this false notion that like, well, things are looking better. Things are rebounding. The economy is going to rebound. This, I think, was best represented, something that I talk about all the time, okay? The true rate of unemployment tracks the percentage of U.S. labor force that does not have a full-time job, 35 plus hours a week, but wants one, has no job, or does not earn a living wage, conservatively pegged at $25,000 annually before taxes. Now, I need you to understand something here, okay? When these guys say the economy is doing well, they're still lying because they use those three metrics, okay? Or when they say the economy is doing poorly, they're technically not lying because it's been doing poorly for a long time, but they're not correct in their assessment. My point is that the economic anger and resentment, the uncertainty that people have felt, was the reason why Bernie Sanders was so successful in the 2016 primaries and why Donald Trump won in the 2016 elections. And people refuse to recognize that. And that's precisely the reason why after Joe Biden's victory in 2020, when the economy obviously was slated to rebound or whatever by the last quarter, even though in the first 3.5 years of Joe Biden's rulership post 2020, Americans experienced negative real wage growth for 1.5 years. This never went away. This resentment and anger never went away against Biden. But the reason why, even when they were talking about how the economy is rebounding, and it certainly did, it trended positively towards the end of the Biden administration. The reason why I kept repeating over and over again that this is still not a success was for the very same reason that when the economy was seemingly hot, all the way back in 2016, for the average American, it still was not working. And there has never been a point, I would say, since 2008 especially, where the economy has actually worked for the working class. Not at all. So whenever these guys run the same back and forth on, jobs numbers, unemployment numbers, GDP numbers, all this they're actually refusing to factor in how terrible the economy is for the average working class American. Okay?
At survey data, the response rate has really dropped in recent years. So they're trying to merge survey data with now in this report, Brianna, much clearer and much more pointed tax filing data that businesses provide. And they're trying to merge those two and trying to paint a clearer picture. But also in those tax filings from companies, they will not be reporting undocumented workers. And so we know that they are a large portion of the labor force, but they will not be counted in this report. That is also why you can potentially see that this number is revised a lot lower than was anticipated.
Yeah, parallels to your analogy about giving a homeless dude $1 and expecting them to be grateful. Not even $1. You walk by a homeless person and you chuck a dime at them, and then they turn around and they spit at you and you say, "What do you mean? Your financial circumstances have improved by 10 cents. I just gave you 10 cents. How dare you not be grateful?" That's it. Simple explanation of how GDP is not a perfect metric.
Let's say you pay someone $100.
Oh my God. It's going to be the 3-minute version of the two economists walk into the woods argument. Okay. It's one that I use all the time as well. Okay. Two economists walk into the woods. One economist says to the next, there's right there. "I'll give you $50 if you eat that." The economist eats the and takes the $50. Okay? Then they keep walking. There's another on the ground. The second economist who just ate the turns to the first and says, "Hey, I'll give you $50 if you eat that piece of on the ground." First economist says, "Yes, I'll take it." They stop and they go, "What was this for? We both ate and the $50 is back in my pocket." First economist says, "Aha, but we just increased the GDP by $100. That's it. That is $100 worth of economic growth."
$100 to clean your apartment. Well, congrats. You just boosted your country's GDP by $100. But here's the catch. If you cleaned your apartment yourself, the GDP wouldn't go up at all because there wasn't a sale. Even if you'd produce the exact same output as someone else cleaning your apartment. That's one reason why it isn't a perfect metric. So if you've ever wondered how it's possible for people to survive in some countries with really low GDPs, it's partly because they do a ton of these activities themselves without a sale. Activities such as farming for food, cooking, childcare, and elder care. None of that gets counted towards GDP, whereas buying takeout and paying for a daycare would count towards GDP. So how exactly is this metric calculated? Well, it's this whole formula, but to oversimplify how it works, you start by just adding up every dollar people spend in your country. The idea is that when you spend $1, someone else must have had to produce something worth $1. So how much we spend is how much we produce. Okay, but what if you spend $10 on a t-shirt at a local shop, but it was produced abroad? Then wouldn't this methodology add $10 to your country's GDP even though your country didn't produce this $10 t-shirt? Well, to factor that out, we subtract imports, so that you're just left with the items that your own country produced. And the reverse is true for exports, where you add exports to the amount that your country produced. Now, the only thing with our modern globalized economy is that the math is never this clean, since almost every good we have is produced by a bunch of countries, not just one. But no worries, because you could add up just the parts of a good that your own country produced. For example, let's say you produce and sell a bike in the United States for $500, but you had to import a bunch of parts for the bike for $300. That means that you add $500 to the US GDP when you sell the bike, but subtract $300 for your imports, meaning that you increased American GDP by $200. But okay, the math still isn't this clean either, because corporate accountants kind of mess with these numbers. For example, you would think that if Apple sells an iPhone for $1,000, but paid $300 abroad to get it manufactured, then Apple increased the US GDP by $700 $700, right? Well, not really. A lot of that $700 actually went to Ireland. This is because Apple wants to avoid paying taxes, so Apple created a subsidiary company in Ireland, and that Irish company technically owns the intellectual property rights for the iPhone. In fact, when Apple transferred its intellectual property to Ireland in 2015, this boosted Ireland's GDP by so much that the IMF estimated that 25% of Ireland's GDP growth in 2017 came from the iPhone. Though obviously the Irish people don't benefit at all from this GDP growth, as there weren't that many Irish engineers, designers, or workers hired to make this iPhone. And Irish people don't get to keep Apple's profits. And this is just one example of corporate accounting that messes with the numbers, but these type of practices are extremely common. And there are a lot more flaws with GDP as a metric in general. For example, if an oil spill happens and you have to spend $2 billion to clean it up, well, that boosts the GDP by $2 billion. Even though oil spills intuitively should be a negative thing, especially for the environment. The reasons why GDP is so flawed could be an entire video on its own, but hopefully this gave you a good overview on how the basics work.
This is a 0 out of 10 explanation because he did not talk about two economists walking in the woods and eating Sorry. I'm just saying. Yes, you're right. A truly flawed video. Job applications have been turning into a nightmare process for a while, but this got dismissed as some TikTok derangement vibe for years while the labor market was tight. It's got slack now. If you make people feel like they're playing a rigged game, especially for something as crucial as self-worth or meeting basic needs of the job, where do you expect that frustration to go? When new words are invented to explain a recession, I'm like a chocoholic but for booze. Trump is in danger of getting trapped in the same vibe-session dynamic that doomed Biden, only this time the structural signals are flashing red and Trump's signature legislation is toxic. Using vibe-session to describe distress caused by a stuttering economy reminds me of the classic Onion piece. Yeah. This time it's going to be worse, though. Like, that's the other thing. It's going to be worse. Donald Trump is ill-equipped to deal with anything, really. But, or especially this.